Hello, my name is Don Duncan. I'm Director of Business Development for NuData Security. And today I'm going to be talking about how to stop fake accounts before they get to your checkout using behavioral biometrics. Who is NuData? NuData was established in 2008, and it was required by MasterCard, and is really focused on the area of protecting online activities, and is a pioneer in the area of passive behavioral biometric verification. By analyzing billion events annually, NuData has harnessed the power of behavioral analytics and passive biometrics, enabling customers to identify the human behind the device accurately. This allows clients to verify users before a critical decision inside their application, blocking account takeover, stopping account or automated attacks, and reducing customer insults or friction during the application experience. And NuData is continuously growing and increasing the number of behavioral events processed per year. As you can see here, year after year from 2013 to 2018, with 2018 being an all-time high of 400 billion events. Since 2013, our cloud consortium behavioral biometric network has grown by over 5,000%. What many people don't realize is that up till this point, especially looking at our NuData clients, what we've noticed is that 36% of all new accounts are fake. That means that the user that you're engaging with inside your web or mobile application may not be a real user, but an impersonator of some sort. And 1/3 of all these accounts are new accounts. But companies don't realize this until it's too late. Until these accounts have already given way to fraudulent activity and purchases have already been made online. What's at stake? U.S. card fraud losses have exceeded $12 billion in 2020, according to the Nielsen report. And it's not just online fraud purchases, but loyalty fraud as well. Loyalty fraud from one average customer can cost the economy $13,800. In terms of rewards, this is an estimated 225 to 350 billion of unclaimed rewards for airlines, hotels, and other loyalty programs that are out there. There's a lot at stake for customers and companies offering services online, such as purchases, reward redemptions, and gift card redemptions. But they all have one thing in common. The common denominator? When a fraudster has some payment information, they create a new account and they can make a fraudulent purchase. When a fraudster has stolen loyalty points or rewards information, they create an account and make fraudulent redemption of the rewards or cash in some other form, often with a gift card. When a fraudster has stolen information from a gift card from a company that requires an account to make a purchase, they use the company's new account placement to create a new one. The new account placement is a common denominator for different types of fraud throughout the web or mobile application. This does not include account takeover, where they use an existing account to make a fraudulent purchase or activity. What's the challenge? The challenge is providing a seamless customer process for accounts, onboarding, and registration. Meanwhile, providing a good user experiences with that application and making a good first impression and weeding out those fake accounts. How are accounts created? They can be created in multiple ways. Automation, fraudsters use scripts to fill out the forms and create new accounts en masse. Some merchants can detect automated scripts at work, so fraud rings use human farms. Human farms are a group of individuals who their job is to create new accounts manually for hours. They use this information, they can bypass security measures looking for automated scripts. Human farms can create new accounts at a massive scale. And then you have the individual fraudster. An individual person can go in, create an account using the information they have, but they do it at a much lower scale. How much does it cost for fraudsters? Not much at all. When you look at what is required for a fraudster to go in and create these accounts, looking at this slide here, we can see really the breakdown or really the toolkit that they use to create this. They download the software. They download the configuration file that they're going to be using to commit the fraud for that particular web or mobile site. They already have a repository of credit card information that they're going to draw from, which the fraudster has already purchased in advance, and this gift card information or rewards information is used once the account has been created. They then run the software, and then as you can see here, you can see the potential for cost in regards to what is impacting the individual merchant. And then also, what is the reward potential for that fraudster? So because they're not just doing one account, but many accounts at the same time, especially looking at this instance of $985 and an instance of 100 attacks, there's ability to create large amounts of money in a short period of time. Being a fraudster isn't hard. Threats and attacks only get more sophisticated over time and affordable, especially as we start seeing more and more data breaches and the cybercrime market gets more saturated. Just last week with Zhangzhou Hotel's breach, they were selling customer information at fractions of a cent for each. This is really where we start getting into how do you deal with those types of fraudsters? What are the tools to use? Detecting new account fraud with behavioral biometrics. If I don't know who the user is, how can I trust him or her? Instead of necessarily looking at the car that that individual is driving, such a device, using multiple data points as a means to validate who this user is. In the case of new account fraud, there is no known user and by no extension, no existing user profile. Until recently, companies focused on the information entered by the user and other parameters that could be easily spoofed, such as device information or geolocation information, to determine whether it was a risky or not user at the end of that device. As a result of that, many bad actors were able to spoof their information and impersonate what merchants thought were good users. Companies need to start looking at the behavior. So when opening a new account, fraudsters behave quite differently than legitimate users, and these patterns can be recognized by behavioral biometrics technology. Behavioral biometrics is able to recognize patterns on how we interact with the device and how we can engage with those users inside an application. By detecting new account fraud with behavioral biometrics, we're using 3 different points to determine this. We're using cognitive factors. We're looking at device interaction preferences, hand-eye coordination, and application patterns. Psychological factors, hand tremors. Am I left-handed, right-handed? How do I hold that device? Being able to take much of the device information and using that as a means to determine, is it a human or is it a script impersonating an individual? And also looking at context. How does a person navigate that screen? Are they looking at particular behavioral patterns? How do they navigate networking events? All these actually are used to create a baseline to determine whether it's an actual user or a form of bad actor. And then signs of a new account fraud. So many fraudsters, when they're going through and they're creating these new accounts, they're already very familiar with these forms that are online or with inside a web application. They know how to navigate those forms by heart. They're very efficient in terms of the navigation going from field to field, and they show a fluency in their behavior. This fluency gives, using behavioral biometrics, an understanding as to, is this somebody new to this form or is it somebody that's very familiar with it that knows how to navigate it based on past experience? Looking at the time it takes to complete that form, whether they have the ability, whether they're skipping optional fields altogether, and something as simple as being able to use shortcut keys on a PC or a Mac. Are they using cut, copy, paste, for instance? This is a sign of potential fraud, and the ability to look at this information in a document and paste it in there without actually having to remember it. So signs of a new account fraud. Fraudsters often use advanced computer skills that are rarely seen on real users. For example, keyboard shortcuts that I mentioned before, that cut, copy, paste. The ability to use, are you using a mouse instead of shortcuts? The ability to look at how does that user navigate? The ability to move one box to another. Are they tabbing or are they hitting return? And then also some even more advanced shortcut functions such as, Shift Tab, which is only used by, in many instances, a small portion of the population. These are all things that are tells that give you the ability to determine, is it a human or is it somebody impersonating somebody in the form of a script or potentially a human form? So the ability to understand, one, how that user interacts with the form, but also how are they entering that information into the form? The ability for them to enter their name, last name, address, date of birth, for instance. The ability to determine, how quickly do they do this? Do they do this in a short period of time, or are they actually typing faster than a human can type? Being able to understand that determines, is it an actual person, a living, breathing individual, or is it an automation that's executing a script that's doing a high velocity input into those particular forms online? The ability to look at, how does the user correct a field? Do they mistype, for instance, Don Duncan, for instance, repeatedly? Do they backspace and then go back and enter that information again? Do they pause, or do they long type on specific fields? This is all intelligence that can be used as a means to determine whether it's a human or not. Especially looking at economies of scale, when the attack is not just one, but thousands. So looking at, is this one individual, or are we seeing a pattern of behavior that's happening in a concerted period of time? Looking at mass scale attacks, where fraudsters are trying to hide themselves by changing their IP addresses, changing their geolocation, and in many instances, looking at when those periods of attacks that are happening and detecting those scripted attacks so that customers and companies can leverage biometrics as a means to determine, using this technology, whether it's a real user or in form of impersonation. And really also real time, not looking at the attacks that are happening 3 days after the fact once the purchase has been done, but understanding when that account creation is being created, or that process is being initiated within inside the web or mobile application, knowing it at then and there, and the ability to mitigate it in real time. The ability to monitor your traffic from those different angles and those different data points, being able to build a profile of what those attacks look like. Because again, going back to what we mentioned before, fraudsters are constantly changing their attack patterns and their strategies in regards to how they're creating those accounts and committing fraud inside those mobile and web applications. As you can see here, this is an instance of where you can see these peaks and valleys of where the green being standard good user engagement, and those reds being patterns where it's been identified, where there is a form of automation that's being initiated, and how it's being done, not just once, but in large scale. And then by looking at that pattern, being able to understand and create rules to prevent this from occurring, being able to actively create and prioritize and identify that fraud, and look at it, creating a strategy to defend against it within inside your web or mobile application, but at the same time too, doing it in such a way that you're not affecting those good users who are trying to come in and you're trying to engage with. And then really looking at, this is great intelligence for you to understand who your users are. By understanding who your users are, you can customize the user experience. The ability to understand, for instance, looking at this chart here, who are your trusted users? Who are those ones that you want to present services to that are going to be most meaningful and are going to be received in a way that you want them to be received? And then being able to identify those high-risk clients, potential fraudsters, bad actors, where you give them either limited access or being able to prevent them without actually locking out those good users. For instance, the ability to reduce for those good users the number of clicks it takes to actually get them to purchase something inside your web or mobile application, making that application experience much more gratifying. And then for the automation, being able to put in those application speed bumps, such as multi-factor authentication, to stop that account creation early on, not after the fact. The point I'm trying to get across is really use risk-based assessments to customize user experience. Without it, fraud in the form of automation and good users are all treated the same. It means that a fraudster is getting that VIP treatment that your good users are getting. and use the risk-based assessment as a means to penalize the fraudsters, make it much more costly for them, and use interdiction as a means to stop them while rewarding the good users with targeted services and promotions. New account openings are an opportunity to make a good first impression with the customer, and it can be damaging to a brand or the reputation of a company if it's mishandled. If you go to the Google or you go to the app stores, for instance, and you look at reviews for applications, you're going to see many reviews in there of customers who are frustrated or clients who, as a result of their first impression with that account creation process, when they download an application and they engage with it for the first time, they're frustrated. They may not be a repeat customer coming back. And that is one of the key things here, is it's not just providing a customer experience that's going to stop fraudsters, but a much more enjoyable user experience for those people who are trying to engage with you. So what do you do with this risky traffic? How do you deal with those fraudsters that are out there, and knowing when to engage in what capacity at that time? So the ability to look at the ability to block that interaction, those application speed bumps for automation and fraudulent activity based on risk. The ability to monitor and have that visibility to understand who you're engaging with. Very much like you're in a store, somebody's coming in, you've never seen them before. The ability to understand, you know what, is this somebody I recognize? Is there potential for risk here? When you walk into a physical store, one of the things you'll see is security cameras, you'll see the height chart by the door. You know what, there's all information, just somebody coming into your store, you have the ability to gather information from without actually talking to them. And this is where we can actually provide online those tools to provide you that visibility. And then step up, the ability to have a form of interdiction to prevent that automation from proceeding further without locking out that account and preventing the good user from being able to log in themselves at the same time and purchase something. In many instances you've seen, especially from an application perspective, are either SMS messages, for instance, email validation, Google's reCAPTCHA, and behavioral NuData capture, which I'll be talking about in a second. So there are strategies online from an application perspective that you can use at that point in time to determine when do you engage with those fraudsters, how do you engage, and what's the appropriate interdiction point at that point in time. I may have a CAPTCHA maybe at login, but you know what, maybe I have an SMS validation at some point during the customer journey. So that is having that intelligence so you can make those educated decisions as part of what the user will see as they engage with your web or mobile application. And then really, how do you deal with those bots that are out there? Bots are getting more and more sophisticated. You hear instances of where they're starting to get to the point where they can actually solve those CAPTCHAs. Well, a real user should never see a CAPTCHA. It should just be that automation. In the form of the automation, where somebody can come in, they can actually solve that CAPTCHA in the form of a bot, have the ability to make it much more complicated. So they solve it, but they come back again, and based on that solution that's been solved for the CAPTCHA, again, you still determine that they're a form of automation. The ability to make it much more difficult, the ability to have things such as video, language, all different aspects in terms of interdiction that can be used in the CAPTCHA process. And then the ability to tune that at various levels in real time. So don't have a CAPTCHA that's going to be used for all those bots, but have one that's going to be addressing that specific behavior of that bot at that point in time. And make it time consuming for that bot to decode. The more time that you're tying up that bot, it means the less money that that fraudster is actually making. And then also looking at it as being a form of real-time analysis and feedback. Understanding what bots are actually triggering those CAPTCHAs to be detected or displayed. And at the same time too, making sure that those real humans are never seeing those bots. And then looking at this, the concept of protecting your whole application. When you look at your application, web or mobile, in the context of both, fraudsters are jumping from one to the other. They'll try web, they'll try mobile, they'll find those areas where in the application it's easy to actually penetrate and commit fraud. So not just looking at account creation, but looking at other aspects of the customer engagement, looking at gift card balance checkers, login, finding out if your username actually exists or not, and then password reset. Worst things that can happen is that I, as a user, am locked out of my own account because a fraudster has gone in, they've done a password reset, and they've actually hijacked my account. So understanding that it's not just one, but looking at your whole application, your omni-channel strategy holistically. And as a result of that, don't forget to monitor your other placements and evaluate risk, because those fraudsters are actually going to be checking all those key placements. Know who is behind the device. So going back to the analogy before is looking beyond the device, looking beyond the car, understanding how that driver uses the car. That gives you an idea of the intent, whether it's a good user or whether it's a fraudster that's driving that car. And protect your assets. Don't just look at account creation, but also look at checkout, rewards, gift card accounts. This is real-time intelligence that's of value, especially from a security perspective. This information can be used not just in real time with inside your application, but it can also be consumed with inside your existing fraud operations, as well as your security SIM tools. By blocking new account fraud, you're protecting the fraud that can stem from it. Fraudulent transactions on checkout, fraudulent rewards redemption, fraudulent use of credit cards with inside the environment. Engaging early upstream in the engagement process with inside the application, doing that vetting in advance of the transaction helps prevent a lot of that fraud from occurring downstream. So the main common denominator is looking at payment information. How do you protect those new account placements? Blocking it from automated attacks. Human farms and individual fraudster attacks are still harder ones to prevent, but with behavioral biometrics, you have a better view of who's opening those accounts. And then that information gives you the ability to make educated decisions. And this ultimately comes down to, now that you've protected that new account, you have the ability to prevent new account creations going forward. Ultimately, we're going back to providing a better user experience, making it users to engage with you online as you're moving to digital services online from those services you traditionally would provide with inside the confines of the store. Thank you very much for taking this time to view this presentation. And please do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions.